Seats, please. November the 5th was yesterday, not today. Are you all in order? It is 10:30. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Lincolnshire County Council Planning Regulation Committee, 6th of November, 10:30. I'm Councillor Ian Fleetwood, Chairman of the committee. To my immediate right, I've got Councillor Charlotte Vernon, who is my Vice Chairman. In the area in front of me, I've got various planning, legal, democratic officers and a committee off to my right-hand side. We have got a fairly full agenda today. We've got quite a few speakers, so I'm going to rattle along at a fairly good rate of knots, but we will give debate to everybody and everything. We have had the fire alarms already this morning, so if you hear them ringing out, please leave the building to my rear, go out to the front of the building, congregate in the car park, and we'll hopefully account for everybody at that point. If anybody wants water, there is water at the rear of the room, and I think most people know where the WCs are, etc. So, without further ado, I'm going to move on to item 1, apologies replacement members, and I believe we have a pretty full complement. So, I don't see any changes there. Okay, item 2 is... Oh, hang on a minute.
Chairman, we have apologies from Councillor Reid.
Sorry, Councillor Reid. Yeah, didn't notice you weren't there. You do make a big impact on the meetings, honest. Item 2 is declarations of members' interests. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. It's not an interest, but I'd just like it noted for clarity that under S23-1472, the planning application at South Women, I've obviously been present at parish council meetings when this has been discussed. However, I've not expressed a view and come into this afternoon with an open mind, except it's this morning. Thank you.
I thought there was a different time zone between you and I, but okay, we're not that far apart. Okay, so over there, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. I have an interest in 7.1 as per my DPI. I have not discussed this with Sir Edward Lee in any way, shape or form. His views are his and mine are mine. I'm coming to this with an open mind. And for the interest of those in the room, as per the constitutional arrangements of planning, as far as I'm aware, Chairman, I can debate but can't vote as I wasn't able to attend the site visit. But just to make that clear, that's why I won't be voting on that item.
Thank you. Anybody else? I'll give you fair time. Okay, right. Item 3 then is minutes of the previous meeting, 2nd of October, previously circulated. I don't know if there are any amendments. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Mike Brooks brought up some points, and it was regarding the end date and the Secretary of State to put the end date in, and I just wondered if that item had been followed up, because I can't see from the minutes whether it has been or not. Councillor Smith had proposed the motion and I seconded it, but it was really important that what Councillor Mike Brooks came out with. I'll just ask the officers to comment, please. Thank you.
Sorry, I missed that slightly. I was just looking at something else as an update. Sorry, can you repeat that? Sorry, Councillor Skinner.
Yes, Councillor Mike Brooks came on screen, and on the item regarding electricity, and I think it was to do with his ward with Bicker. He mentioned a ruling by the Secretary of State, and there was no end date included on that, and you were to write to the Secretary of State and ask for the end date. I just wanted to know whether that had actually been done or not, because it's not included in the minutes, but it was very definitely discussed, because well, I'll refer to Tom. We did actually put that amendment in, following what Tom had discussed, and I just wanted to make sure it happened. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I assume you're talking about the local impact report that was brought with regard to Heckington Fen NSIP. Yeah. With regard to that, we submitted our local impact report. The formal representation will be being made, deadlines tomorrow. In terms of end date, then certainly that application had proposed a 40-year life as part of the development consent order. And so certainly that's what we'd be advocating and supporting through submission. I think that's what we would be doing and making representation. That's what the applicants proposed as well as part of the application.
Obviously, with the environment, obviously some sort of plan to deal with it all after 40 years as well. Because from my point of view, that should be part of the planning consent. The fact that they're required to vacate it or whatever at the end of that time.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I mean, on that, I mean, I can assure you that certainly as part of the development consent order, there are decommissioning strategies that require...
I prefer it not to be a strategy. I prefer it to be a request for it to be removed at the end of, or them to apply for something further. Otherwise, it's too woolly for me. Thank you.
Noted. Well, definitely that is representation we make at those hearings and subsequent hearings, which we've got coming up in mid-November.
Okay, we're going to cease this one now. We're doing a very large departure from the agenda item, which is approving the minutes. Whilst it's an important factor and it's been highlighted, I do think we need to move on, and I don't think there's any additional amendment to the minute there. So I'm going to propose the minutes. Councillor Skinner seconding them. All in favour, please shout. So therefore the minutes stand as they are. Okay, item 4 is notes of the site visit held on the 23rd of October. For those that were present, you've seen those minutes, those notes as well. So I hope you're happy to receive those. Okay, so I will therefore move you on to item 5, traffic items, and 5.1, which is Doddington, the B1190, the proposed puffing crossing facility. Jan, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just wait for the... So, yes, this is a proposed puffing crossing facility at Doddington. Next slide, please. The village lies on the B1190, just to the west of the city. Next slide, please. As in the report, the members approved a crossing here in line with the policy. And since that time, funding has come through the Community Crossings Initiative, and we're therefore obliged to advertise the crossing prior to building it. We've received 2 objections, mainly around a desire for the funding for this scheme to be spent on alternative measures to curb traffic flow and speed through the village and perhaps restrict HGV traffic. Unfortunately, we're not able to spend this funding on anything other than the crossing, and we have therefore recommended that the objections are overruled. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to open it to committee. Councillor Mrs Overton, please.
Thanks. Bearing in mind that the money can't be spent on anything else, and that's perhaps not the planning issue anyway, I think it is important, this one. I know this one a lot. I've used this quite a lot, this particular crossing, and every time I think, why on earth haven't we got a puffin crossing here or something similar? So I do see this as very much needed and would like to propose it. Thank you.
Thank you. I've also been to this location on a fairly regular basis for various events just across the road, and know it well, so I'm quite happy to second it. Would anybody else like to speak to this item? Therefore, proposed and seconded, all in favour, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. So I'll therefore move you to 5.2 Great Gonaby, B1174, on the High Street, again, a proposed puffing crossing facility. Jan, please.
Thank you. So, moving down to Great Gonaby, we're also proposing a new puffing crossing facility on the B1174. Next slide, please. The village lies on the route between the A1 and Grantham, so there's quite a lot of traffic flow. Next slide, please. So there's an existing zebra crossing, and our first consideration was to introduce the puffing crossing facility at this location, but road safety audit highlighted some issues with that, so we looked for an alternative location, which is shown on this plan. We've had a number of objections as it's situated adjacent to properties. Residents are concerned about noise and disturbance from the facility, the removal of parking outside properties and potential devaluing of property, and also potential effect on the local shop, which is at number 4 there on the junction with Long Street. We can mitigate the impact of the crossing in terms of its audible and visual signals, and we acknowledge that the zigzag markings will prohibit waiting, loading and stopping, but would say that there is alternative parking available to the north of the site where no restrictions are in place. We therefore have proposed that the objections are overruled, as we believe that this will improve safety for pedestrians and be of benefit to the community as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. This location is obviously very, very busy. About half a mile further up you have the A1, and whilst all the traffic should be doing the appropriate speed in this built-up zone, you never can tell. I hear the local objections, but I do also support the issues with regard to where the county council are coming from. I think pedestrian safety is paramount. This is a very busy location. I'm quite happy to move the recommendation. Can I have a seconder, please? Seconded by Councillor Skinner. Would anybody else like to speak? Seeing nobody, proposed by me, seconded by Councillor Skinner, that we put into place the proposed Puffin crossing facility. All in favour, please show. Again, that is unanimous, but I will say anybody against any objections. Seeing none, so that is therefore carried. 5.3 is Withen, A157, proposed bus stop clearway. Jan, please.
Thank you. So the final report today relates to a proposed bus stop clearway on the A157 at Withen. Next slide, please. So Withen's located just to the southeast of Louth on that major route. Next slide, please. Our Transport Services team approached us regarding parking on this marking, which obstructing access to the bus stop and shelter. Visits to site indicated that parking was taking place in this area, so we proposed to make the existing marking formal by introducing a bus stop clearway to apply. I think it was Monday to Saturday, 7 till 7, excuse me, and we received one objection. The objection's based on potential for parking to be displaced, particularly that relating to delivery vehicles for a nearby business. Our site visits have confirmed that there is always plenty of parking in the area, so we don't anticipate that this will negatively impact on residents in the area. Therefore, propose that the objection is overruled. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction again. So I'll open it to committee. I am again familiar with this location. As you're probably aware, it's the A road going through towards the coast. There is quite a large traffic flow. I can understand why Sunday is excluded, because I would question, I don't know for sure, but I would question whether there would be a Sunday service down here. But certainly in those time zones, I think it's an appropriate thing to put into place. I will propose it, seconded by Councillor Skinner, and seconded by Councillor Sear. Sorry, no, Sear. I've been told off. No, it's in my ward. It's in your ward. Oh, there we go. Anybody wish to comment? Okay, therefore, proposed by myself, seconded by Councillor Sear. All in favour, please show now. Thank you, that's unanimous. So therefore, that concludes the traffic items. Thank you, Jan. Item 6 is County Matters Applications. 6.1 is a supplementary report with regard to the West Deepings Quarry. So I'm going to, I don't know, are you ready? Okay, so Mr. Willis, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Chairman. Good morning, members. Yeah, this application takes us to West Deeping. As you say, it's the application It's 2 applications relating to West Eaton Quarry to reduce the standoff distances to allow further working close to the receptors within the site. Members will be aware that the report was first considered at committee on the 4th of September, where it was deferred for a site visit, and that site visit took place on the 23rd of October. The minutes of that meeting have been agreed previously. If I can have the slides, please, Rachel. Since the last meeting, the applicant has submitted some further information, some revised phasing plans to replace those previously submitted. They don't significantly change anything other than to confirm the duration of the operations, which will now be limited to 8 weeks, confirmed as 8 weeks for each of the additional working areas, and also some additional commentaries in relation to heritage impacts and hydrology. And the report sets out a summary of what those commentaries say. To state, just to reiterate, they don't alter the proposals or the conclusions that were previously made in any way, but seek to clarify matters that the committee had raised and discussed at the last meeting. If we can just have a next slide or 2, please, just to next one again, please. And again, so these are the plans the committee saw last time. Next one, please, Rachel. Just wanted to bring these up. This one just is an extract from the revised phasing plan that's been submitted, which I say doesn't change any of the limits, but just confirms, as you can see on the plans, this property here you're looking at is Lodge Farm. Members will be aware we saw that on site. Next slide, please. This one is Crown Farm, again just showing commitment to that 8-week duration. And next slide, please. And that is Rectory Farm, which again. In terms of, as I say, the report, or as members see, that it's substantially the same in terms of the officer's recommendation. There's no change. We're satisfied that the operations, subject to the conditions have been recommended, would be capable of being controlled to an acceptable level. The only difference that has been introduced since the last report in the recommendation is that the updated phasing plan be referenced to now give a commitment to that 8 weeks of duration, and an additional condition has been recommended on both decision notices that require the applicant to notify the planning authority of the commencement of works in each phase. That ensures there's the ability to control and monitor the duration of activities in line with that time frame. So the recommendation, there is an error on the report, if I can just highlight that out, on the recommendation under A, which relates to S23-102. It's the revised conditions as per Appendix D of the report and not B. I think B refers to those that were embedded in the original report. And similarly for recommendation B, which relates to S23-103, it's the revised conditions in Appendix E of the report, not C. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Willis. Now, we do have a couple of speakers here. I believe we've got Maria Cotton from the Breeden Group who would like to speak on behalf of the applicant. I don't know, is this a virtual? No? Oh, you're here, hello. Good morning. Sorry, you've come from behind me. A little early for pantomime season, but... So whenever you're ready, the floor is yours. You have 3 minutes to address the committee, and potentially there might be the odd question pertinent from the committee, who knows, with regard to the application. Floor is yours when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank you for coming out to site to see the visit, to see the site on the 23rd of October. The planning applications before you for consideration, considered proposal today propose a reduction of the standoff for the properties sitting within the existing operational landscape of West Eaton Quarry. These proposals will bring the operations into line with those previously approved on the adjacent operations of King Street Quarry and deliver a more uniformed approach to the final landform of the area as a whole. The proposal would ensure the avoidance of sterilisation of 200,000 tonnes of sand and gravel. The tonnage released by these proposals would equate to 6 to 9 months' worth of sales, but would be extracted over a period of 8 weeks within each of the 3 phases. Breeden are more than happy to accept a condition to this effect. It is also noted that despite planning permission being granted until the 21st of February 2042, Breedon are expected to have completed extraction of all minerals within the next 36 months. The progressive restoration of the quarrying operations will continue at pace, with more than 50% of the site being restored to final levels to date. The proposal before you does not alter the principal restoration and would offer a more natural final landform than that currently approved. Reports prepared for these applications on hydrology, noise, dust and cultural heritage show that the approval and implementation of the proposals would not change the outcome already formally approved. The continuation of noise, dust and water monitoring of the operations would continue as per the existing approved schemes. The use of straw bales during the 8-week extraction operations would ensure the accepted industry standard of noise levels is complied with in accordance with the existing planning conditions. Indeed, the use of straw bales rather than the more traditional soil screen bunding reduces the noise impact on neighbouring properties, as there will be a noise barrier in place before the works commence, whereas the construction of a soil screen bund allows for higher noise levels directly impacting surrounding properties. An additional benefit of this approach is the reduced carbon footprint due to less machinery being used to install noise attenuation. It is proposed to utilise the same straw bales on all phases, so their removal will be prompt after the completion of extraction operations. We support the recommendation for approval of these planning applications and respectfully ask the committee to grant planning permission subject to the appropriate conditions, and will be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You finished with 6 seconds to spare, which is excellent. Are there any questions from the committee of Maria? Councillor Pepper, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the applicant has probably almost answered what I was going to ask anyway, but regarding the restoration, I understand the properties to be somewhat in the centre of circles, so to speak, putting it bluntly. And I think you've answered it, but is there any difference to the shape and the size of that finished product? Should the excavation be at the 100 metres or the 25 metres? And I've got another question following that one, so go ahead.
So, do you mean the final restoration, will it be different to as approved?
Yes, surrounding those properties, if the
Yes.
restoration, will it be any different if we cut it back to the 25 metres as opposed to the 100 metres? And I'll ask the next question now. And how will that materialise? Will there be a steep drop around those circles, or will it be graded? And will the lower part naturally fill up with water in time?
Thank you for your questions, Councillor Pepper. The proposed restoration now would be more to a natural field boundary, whereas the current approved restoration has the 3 properties sitting on almost islands. So the adjacent quarrying operations at Cemex, they have reduced their standoffs are much reduced in line to what our applications are requesting, and the field boundaries are a lot more natural. So that's essentially, it would be more of a natural field, and not all of the areas will be water features. Some of them will be agricultural land.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Mrs Overton, please.
Sorry, excuse my ignorance, but 200,000 tonnes that you want to remove, how many vehicles is that?
In relation from where? Sorry.
I think you said that this area, the extra area that you want to remove, is 200,000 tonnes. Did I hear that correctly? In which case, how many vehicle movements extra are we expecting? Thank you.
There wouldn't be any additional vehicle movements. The material from the quarrying operations is taken to the plant site via conveyor.
So the vehicles would be on the road, not within sight, you're saying? Okay.
So the material is taken to stockyard, to stockpiles within the quarry, and then it's loaded onto a conveyor and taken to the plant sites.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much. Well, thank you for answering those questions. And yes, everything, all the material goes off site on a conveyor. It was illustrated when we were on the site visit. So obviously at a later point with the grading plant, etc., whatever material is outputted from the site will go in whatever direction and will be part of those motions. But as far as this site's concerned, everything will be moved off site by a conveyor. Okay, well, thank you very much. If you'd like to retire, I believe my next speaker will be an objector, Mr. Glenn Fuller. And I don't know, is Mr. Fuller online or online? So the floor is yours, Mr. Fuller, when you're ready. So you're on mute at the moment. Could you put your microphone on, please?
Is that better?
That's great, thank you.
Sorry about that. Good morning. Thank you for your site visit and for coming to see firsthand the destruction that West Steeping has had to deal with for over 70 years now. We were disappointed that despite our open offer to come and see the views of the quarry from Molsey Mill, that this was firmly rebuffed by the Minerals and Waste team. I'm sure that during your site visit, you were persuaded by the Minerals officers and Breedon of all the reasons to approve these obscene reductions in standoff distances. It seems highly one-sided that we, the West Deeping community, weren't given the opportunity to put forward our objections to you at the same time. Coming to within 25 metres of people's homes with mineral extraction is absolutely wrong. You all agreed with this at the last meeting before the Minerals and Waste officer, Mark Willis, issued his warnings of the council being sound. The appropriate balance between mineral extraction and people's lives will be forever altered. People's mental and physical health will be harmed. You have very good grounds to refuse these applications. Do not be bullied into believing otherwise. We, the residents, rely on you to protect us. This is your responsibility. But let us be under no illusion, however, as to why Breedon are applying to reduce these standoff distances, despite their previous assurances, as a short time ago as 2019, they had no plans to do so. It's yet another example of them constantly moving the goalposts for us residents. The only reason that Breedon want to reduce these distances is to keep their workforce employed until they can persuade you to grant them permission for their highly controversial new 100-hectare, 30-year quarry on the MS29 site. If you consent to these applications today, you'll be colluding with Breedon to enable them to bring forth their illegal application for this MS29 site. This proposed new quarry will extend quarrying on the doorstep of our village for 30 years. It will destroy almost all of the last remaining countryside around the village. It will take away priceless amenities from our residents and severely damage their physical and mental health. It will destroy the beautiful River Welland. It will destroy several local businesses. Your very Minerals and Waste team have told Breedon that it is not appropriate to submit the planning application for MS29 with a processing plant on that site. This was not its allocation, yet they intend to do so and to try and circumvent the due process. Cemex have already walked away from the site despite their getting the original allocation as an extension to their existing West Deeping quarry. They couldn't make the site work. Breedon want to use this allocation for an extension to sneak through a 100-hectare, 30-year new quarry. Please do not let them do this. We rely on you to protect us. Please refuse these applications and do not collude with Breedon in their underhand methods. Finally, we would like to question the 8-week timescales for these new proposals. By simple maths, that does not seem right. Breedon claim that there is 200,000 tonnes of gravel to extract. Even if it is 8 weeks for each of the 3 sites here, making 24 weeks, the normal extraction rates are around 250,000 tonnes a year. Once again, it seems we're being hoodwinked into believing that the impact will be minimal, and that's simply not true. It's going to take them nearly a year to extract this much sand and gravel. Please stop moving the goalposts and please maintain the appropriate balance between our lives and mineral extraction. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. You've completed with 2 seconds to spare. I assume that's Graham McGee in the background with you, so that really takes the allocation of time up with regard to objectors. Were there any questions? Are there any questions of...
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, I was approved to speak as well.
So you're due to speak as well. Okay, right. So, okay.
Sorry.
We'll allow you 3 minutes then. Okay, so when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for taking time to visit West Deeping Quarry and going to see the quarry near us. We know you have been told by officers to approve this application. You'd have been told that if you don't, Breedons will sue you. You will have been told to put money before history. A Grade 2 listed barn doesn't actually have a value according to officers. You've been told to approve this application. You don't. You can refuse it. Lincolnshire has insurance. It's sued regularly and can be in this instance. Don't be shy to give a value to our history. The built heritage is as much your responsibility as continuous development for profit. As a planning committee, you do have to make difficult decisions, and this is a precursor to the very many difficult decisions you're coming to in South Kesteven. In fact, you already have Baston on your books. By next spring, we will be back talking to you again, imploring you to take responsibility for the historic environment. When Bredons apply for SG11 and SG17, they'll be conducting open cast mining to our very walls. We will be back again asking you to protect another of West Deeping's listed buildings. But this time the fight will be much bigger and much more will be at stake. About £350 million will be at stake versus a Grade 2 listed watermill perched on a sliver of remaining land. If you say today a listed building is not important, then how will you be able to prove it will suddenly be important next spring? It still won't be. The historic environment still won't have a value. Except this heritage asset has a much larger following, a much larger contingent of local people who care. You'll be very surprised how loved the Banana Man's house is. You see, its history is very much alive and well. The old Banana Man's house is loved and cared about. Thank you for opening our email about Gallery in the Garden. Over 1,000 people came at the weekend to see the water wheel turn, to walk around the house and enjoy art and sculpture in the gardens and grounds, and to meet 35 local people selling their locally made goods to local people. What is the value of that? Priceless, I say, certainly more than £350 million. Stand by us today to protect history and say no to this reduction in standoffs. Rectory Farm Barn needs you today and we will need you tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation. So, committee, do you have any questions of either Mr Fuller or Mr McGee? I'll give you the option now. Obviously, they're remotely linked to us. Councillor Noisy, see you, please.
I wonder what question. What you got to do with the barn Litton building? What the future come? Is it the owner or got some issue to do something about it for the future? So that's all I want to know.
We don't own Rectory Farm Barn. We just own a Grade 2 star listed building across the road to which you'll be quarrying to its door from next spring. So we're just here protecting Rectory Farm Barn. We don't own it. It's a listed building in West Deeping, so we're fighting to save another West Deeping's listed buildings.
Thank you for the comments. Any other speakers? Any other questions? Seeing none. Okay. Right. So thank you for that. We'll therefore go back to committee. Mr Willis, any comment at this stage?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of observations, really. Just to remind members, we're dealing with the application that's in front of us today, which is dealing with the amendment to conditions relating to the existing operations. A couple of the speakers there have referenced allocations in the local plan and proposed future working and the implications or precedent, I guess, that they're fearful of with regard to that application. That's not what's in front of you today. The application is for the amendments to the working within this particular site and the impacts associated with that particular heritage asset. As I say, Molesey Mill has been referenced and has been considered within the report, and you will see from the recommendation we're satisfied that the impacts or no impacts, additional impacts are arising from this activity. So just to bear that in mind, please, members, when considering this application.
Thank you very much. I'm going to therefore open to committee, and Councillor Ashton's the first to speak.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr Chairman. It was incredibly useful to go as a member of the committee on the site visit to understand the landscape, understand the application and the relationship between the existing quarry, the proposed development before us today, and the buildings which caused us a little bit of concern last time we debated it. I felt that was really useful. I mean, there is much in this that I don't particularly like, but at the end of the day, it's not down to what I like, but what stacks up in terms of our planning policies. I don't regard this application as having any adverse impact whatsoever on Moseley's Mill. It may be a grade 2 star, but it's overlooking what is currently a quarry. This is, and I don't see the connection between the standoff distances on the three buildings on the three locations that we're debating today and that property. What may come forward in a future application, I'm sure we'll debate at that time. Fundamentally, Heritage England have no overriding objection to this application in respect of the setting of the grade 2 barn that we went to see. I'm reassured that the mitigation that's being put in place and the reduced operating period, the condition that we're suggesting to reduce the operating period within that reduced standoff area, does significantly reduce the impact on the neighbour amenity, the amenity of these properties, if it can genuinely be kept down to that limited time period. And I note that it's not one time period for all three. I think the trigger sets for each one individually to give that reassurance that that it is feasible in the time allocated. And I'm also reassured if we can secure a much more natural reinstatement of the landscape, a natural finish rather than simply having properties that sit there as an island in a quarry. If that can be shaped in such a way as to be more of a natural edge, then that again begins to assuage a concern that I did have as to how these properties would look, how indeed that grade 2 listed barn would look if they were simply like sitting on top of a stool in the middle of a quarry. But the bottom line is, this is still a quarry. This is a quarry at the moment. It's just taking that quarry a little bit closer to these properties. And on the basis of the site visit, on the basis of those two that tweak on the time period and the reinstatement being of a natural kind, I'd be very happy to move this for approval, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. I'd like to echo your opinions with regard to this location. The site visit I felt was most useful, and it was well attended by the committee. It was an interesting opportunity to see from within the site exactly what the impact would have upon these listed properties. It was encouraging to see the gradients and the types of restoration that could be affected in this area. And, you know, it was described to us very thoroughly by the applicant's agent, and we had the opportunity to see this live. We saw the machinery in operation at some distance. We heard the noise, and we also saw potentially any impact with regard to dust and any other types of emission. So I found that valuable too. So on the basis you've moved it, Councillor Ashton, and there was no questions to the officer, I'm going to second the proposal to grant the permission, but I assume that you've moved it on the basis of the amended recommendations of being D not B and E not C, so that the paperwork is in place and we have it all correct. Is there anything the officers would like to say before we take a vote? I'm getting a nod there. I have a hand in the air from Councillor Mrs Overton.
Spoken yet? Right, just to raise, if I might just raise a few issues. I know other sites have been referred to, but actually what I'm thinking about is the cumulative impacts on this site. So where you got, and if you put the picture up of the site that's surrounded all the way around, so it is sitting on an island, if you could just put that picture up, please. Thank you. And I think the point about whether this changes the look of the area, the visual impact, I actually think that's quite important. And we have got a listed site, and when we've got quarries going up to 25 metres, not just on one side, but all the way round, I think that is a significant impact. Also, where you come to the issue of doing it within 8 weeks, I appreciate the attempt, and we did complain that going on 40 years was a long time, and we did raise that. And that demonstrates the visual impact of what it's going to be like, more or less on an island there. And I wasn't very convinced by the restoration that we saw, I have to say. It didn't look very good to me, but I guess it's early days, I suppose, and maybe once it's all grown up, it'll look better. But the point I was going on to next was about the issue of getting it all done in 8 weeks. I appreciate that we wanted a shorter timescale, but putting it in 8 weeks does start to raise other issues. A, is it feasible when you normally do 250,000 tonnes, was it? You normally do 250 in a year, and this is doing 200 in 8 weeks. So firstly, is it feasible? And what happens if they don't keep to it? Presumably they just ask for an extension, I suppose. And secondly, so I'm not convinced that it's feasible. And secondly, is it feasible to do and keep within the conditions? Because we have set the timescale as quite normal conditions, which I appreciate and I think is what you'd expect, so that it's daytime working hours and Saturday morning that comes up. So if you've got those limited hours, which is the normal way, and you're trying to do an exceptional amount of material within 8 weeks, can you also keep within the sound and dust restrictions that we've got and that we've necessarily placed, which is the normal that you do have to place because of the significant adverse impact that we don't want to see on the neighbour, on those 3 properties. So I'm unhappy with this because I realise the applicant is saying what they think is the right thing, but I find it really hard to be convinced that they're not going to come back and ask for an extension or overrun the conditions in terms of noise and dust. So I'm unhappy with the application. Thank you.
So is there anything you want to comment there, Mr. Willis?
Only just to reiterate, I think Councillor Ashton picked up on the point, the 8 weeks relates to each particular additional area of work in. So within each of those areas will be an amount of mineral, not 200,000 relates to the 3 areas in total. So the 8 weeks duration will be worked on a campaign basis, so the activity would effectively focused in that area of work. The 8 weeks was what the applicant had always promoted. The difference this time is that it's now being confirmed through a commitment by the revising the plans. And with regard to the controls on noise, dust, they've been looked at in terms of compliance with the existing conditions and the ability to work with the plant and machinery has been identified to adhere to those controls. So certainly as officers satisfied that the existing controls provide that protection and control, and that those areas can be worked within the time frame that's been identified.
Councillor Mrs. Overton.
Sorry, thank you. Just to cover, can we make sure that the local people understand about how the enforcement works for the council, because they might want to be using that. And I just think 25 metres, quarrying 25 metres from somebody's property, private dwelling property, is just too close. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. But I hear that you have comments in either direction there, but in the last statement you made, you said you were happy with the application. So on the basis... You did?
Sorry, I didn't mean to say that. I beg your pardon. I didn't mean to say that. I don't know why I said that. No, I'm not happy with the application. Thank you.
Right. So, okay, it's been proposed and seconded, proposed by Councillor Ashton, seconded by myself, that the application with the amendments to the conditions of D not B and E not C as identified by Mr. Willis earlier with regard to that particular condition, and I'm trying to remember which condition it was, are acceptable to committee. And I'm getting legal. I'm getting a 2 flashed at me from legal, and two applications. So I'm going to go forward with a vote for the first application, which is, and I assume that Councillor Ashton, you are proposing for both, but we're going to take a vote separately for each one. So I'm going to just clarify that and make the room fully aware of where we're going to go with the vote. So on the first application, S23-102, proposed by Councillor Ashton, seconded by myself, all in favour, please show. And that is 2, 4. And those against, please show. Abstentions, please show. That is clearly carried. So I will therefore, Councillor Mrs Overton.
Sorry, could I have my vote recorded? Thank you.
No problem. So I will therefore move to the next application, which is S23-103, again with the same conditions and the same amendments proposed by Councillor Ashton, seconded by myself. All in favour, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9. Those against, please show. 2. Abstentions, please show. 2. So therefore that is clearly carried. Okay.
Recorded, please. Vote recorded.
That's fine, no problem. So thank you for that. Interesting debate and a well worth of trip to the south of the county to have a look at the site. So I'll move you on then to the next application, which is 6.2. And with this application, I'm looking for my paperwork on it. This is for the application at Fern Cottage, Ings Lane, Bratoft. So the office of that one, I believe, is Mr Willis again. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Chairman. Just wait for the slides to appear. Okay, thank you. So this application, as you say, takes us to Bretoft. It's an application for a C&D waste recycling facility. Just in terms of the first slide, the site location here, the plan gives you an idea of the site size. The application site itself lies to the southwest of the village of Burley Marsh, which is, and also southeast of Bretoft, which is approximately 6 kilometres west of Skegness. The site itself comprises of land and buildings associated with former agricultural business. The site itself is demarked by a combination of ditches, hedgerow boundary fencing and matured trees. If we can have the next slide, please, Rachel. Thank you. So the application, prior to the application, a pre-application advice was sought for a very similar proposal utilising the same area of land, buildings, layout, waste types. A key difference, however, was at the time of the pre-application advice, the application was seeking a 20,000 tonne per year processing facility. The application before members is an amendment or a revision to that original proposal, which had been the advice given by officers that it wouldn't be supported given its size and scale. But the application in front of committees is effectively the same insofar as the land area and take. The proposal itself, in terms of the nature of the plant and equipment, the site layout. A key difference, however, is that the applicant's now proposing a 3,000 tonne a year facility, which is an 85% reduction in that was previously proposed. The plan on screen perhaps doesn't come out very well for members, but it shows effectively an excavation of two lagoons, one for fresh water to feed a wash plant and one for the settlement of residue from that wash plant. And it also shows an internal access road being constructed along the south-eastern boundary with a new access in the north-eastern boundary to create a one-way system. Can I have the next slide, please, Rachel? As part of the proposal, it's proposed to put in a site cabinet and office to serve as office accommodation to serve servicing the development. That would be 2 porta cabin type buildings stacked on top of one another, which would give an approximate height of 6 metres. Within the report, you'll see policies set out on pages 101 to 105, and a key policies of particular reference in this case is policy W7, which sets out the criteria for considering small-scale waste facilities. So given the reduction in the tonnage from the pre-application to the application stage, this proposal now needs to be considered in light with W7. sorry, actually, before we go on to the next bit, can we have the next slides, please, Rachel? Just to give members a bit of a view of the site as it currently appears. This is a view across the yard, just looking towards the north western boundary. Next slide, please. A view within the main yardage area. There is you can see one of the existing buildings just in the background there. Again, next slide, please. This pan's just slightly left of that, to again to around the exit point that's shown on the plan, which is in the report. This would be the exit location. Next slide. This is the view of Ings Lane, which you'll see referenced in the report. Next again, please. Again, so the site is on the right as you look at this picture. So as you can see, existing hedgerow planting, mature hedgerow planting along that side, and this is Ings Lane heading north. Next slide, please. And this is the top northwest corner element, and Ings Lane runs around the top boundary of the site. And again, the proposed new access which would be created is just beyond this tree line. A bit further along this tree line would be the entry point for a new access into the site that would serve as the one-way direction route. In terms of consultations, you'll see these are set out through page 105 onwards. We've received objections from local members here today, so I won't report on those. I'm sure she'll speak. We've had the Environment Agency raise objections with concerns about potential inadequate information with regard to surface water pollution. The National Trust have raised concerns with regard to traffic impacts. Highways have similarly raised concerns with regard to the unsuitable location of the facility and inadequate roads, and queries regarding the viability of the development given the tonnages. We've had one representation received that objects to the proposal, and we've received, subsequent to the update on Friday, a further objection to making that 2 objections, very similar reasons that have been already stated, so nothing new to report with regard to the issues raised there. No objections have been raised by the police or East Lindsey District Council, but subject to the County Council being satisfied that the impacts are acceptable and a comprehensive landscaping scheme could be secured. In terms of the recommendation or the conclusions, they're set out within the report, and there's 2 main issues really need to be considered in dealing with this type of application. It's whether that location is acceptable given its countryside location, and whether or not the impacts of this development could be controlled, or the operations could take place without giving rise to unacceptable harm. I won't go through those in detail, they are set out within the report, but suffice to say, in respect of need and location, as I said, the main issue that this application is considered against is policy 7. That sets out, W7, and that sets out the criteria by which we would assess small-scale facilities, excepting they are sometimes not located in main urban areas. In this particular case, however, the applicant has failed to demonstrate compliance with the required criteria in respect of a proven need for such a facility in this location. This proposal would establish a new small-scale facility in a rural location. There's not been any evidence to suggest that there is a need for a facility to deal with particularly the waste types or the quantities that have been identified, or that particularly this site is well located to manage those wastes. The second strand of main issues relates to the environmental and amenity issues, which again are dealt with in respect of highways, visual impact. But in short, on various matters, insufficient evidence and information has been submitted to demonstrate that the tonnages of waste that are proposed to be handled by the facility could be adequately controlled. Whilst they're proposed to be small in number, there's no weighbridge on site that would make it difficult for officers to monitor and control. And similarly, a traffic vehicle restriction number would be limited and difficult given the low proportions that would equate to from a daily perspective. So given that and the inability to therefore put suitable controls, there's not confidence that the development could be managed in a way that wouldn't give rise to adverse impacts off-site, in particular the highway network, given the nature of the roads in the area. So the recommendation in the report, just bear with me 1 second. is set out on page 114, and its recommendation is that planning permission be refused for three principal reasons. One is that the proposed development would establish a small-scale facility in a rural location, and that the amount of waste to be handled by the facility is extremely low, and the waste type itself is not unique or specialist in nature, which might otherwise justify a new treatment facility to manage this waste. The applicants failed to demonstrate it's well located to a market or source of wastes that it's intended to serve, and that there's a proven need for this facility. The second reason relates to insufficient evidence to be able to control the potential adverse impacts in respect to traffic, because of the tonnage, lack of a facility or mechanism to control traffic numbers. There's a potential, as I've mentioned in the opening, about impacts on highway safety. And thirdly, the third reason relates to the impacts, again, to do with insufficient evidence to be able to satisfy officers to a satisfactory degree that the impact of the development from a visual and noise perspective would be acceptable. There are also concerns given the lack of information about surface water pollution risk to surface water quality. So the recommendation is that permission be refused for the three reasons set out on page 114 of the report.
Thank you for the introduction. I have a couple of speakers to this application. The first one's the applicant, Neil Cooper. I think he's with us, so if you'd like to come to the centre, please, we can afford 3 minutes to address the committee. I think you saw earlier how we deal with this, and then potentially there may be a question or two from the committee with regard to the application. Please take your time, it's not a rush. No?
Don't fall over.
No, absolutely not. Too much paperwork involved. So whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think it's 13 years since I sat here, but as your Vice Chairman. This is a small-scale farm diversification scheme. The Riggle family farm 250 acres, half of which is underwater at the moment, I'm afraid. The application is to process small amounts of building waste where a builder will come in with a vehicle with some mixed stone, gravel, soil, and the idea is to wash the product and generate various streams of aggregate and stone. The nearest stone from the coast is about, or limestone is 40 miles away, and the nearest sand and gravel is over 30 miles away. The reason that we've gone for this site because it does accord with policy W7, where we can use a former yard, and that we've not gone for an industrial estate because to create the two lakes would use land that would cost about £500,000. So it's simply on the scale of this would just not be appropriate. My clients had planning enforcement down last week, saying that he'd started work and what's going on. Your planning officers have inspected the site. There is a stack of rubble on the site of stone, but that came from Tritton Knoll, and that was given free. So it was given for the use of the farm roads within the 250-acre farm. The district council target is for 800 houses a year. So in the locality, there's an awful lot of construction work going on. But I understand that from the county council's allocations of sand and gravel, there is a shortfall of 1.2 million tonnes. So recycling this material only in a small scale would still contribute towards the reduction of taking even more virgin material out of the ground. I hope that you could support this application. It's intended to create a couple of jobs for 2 workers during the winter months so that the farm can survive. It's very difficult with such a small farm to actually make enough money to support the family, and this has just been one way of trying to create extra work and extra business.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cooper. I've allowed you
Thank
well
you,
over
Chair.
the time, but thank you for coming to present the case. Is there any questions of Mr. Cooper? Seeing none, so thank you for attending. If you'd like to retire to your previous position. Oh, sorry, we do have a question from over the side there. Councillor Nutton.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, you propose that the vehicles are going to go through Croft to the 52 or out onto the 158. When it says vehicles, how many vehicles, what size of vehicles?
Thank you. If you're talking of 3,000 tonnes a year, if you work 5 days a week, you'll be 12 tonnes a day for the year. Much of this is anticipated will come on small vehicles of 3.5 tonnes, where small builders' wagons will come in, they'll bring their mixed waste, and it's inert waste. They'll bring it, it'll get sorted, and then it'll be moved out again. It's not, with this being a small scale process, it's not going to generate loads and loads of heavy goods vehicle movements. It's intended to be serviced by small vehicles.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Cooper. I'll allow you to retire, and I'll move on to our next speaker, which is the local member, Councillor Mrs. Bowkett. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. I've obviously objected to this proposal. The site is up and running. It has been done for many months now. The pictures there don't show the true picture of it. If you went out to see it today, there is piles and piles of rubble that lorries have brought in. To say that it's going to be 3,000 tonnes a year, that only equates to 2 vehicles a week. I can guarantee there's more vehicles. 2 in a day would be at least. There's more likely 5 or 6 a day. They're working 7 days a week. I've got witnesses that have shown pictures. They can show pictures of vehicles going down. Vehicles have been cutting down from Station Road in Borough, cutting the back way to Ings, rather than going into Borough, cutting the back way across to Ings Lane. Vehicles have got stuck. I've got pictures of vehicles being stuck, having to reverse back because there's no passing places. This is a large-scale industrial site which they are proposing. The roads are not capable of taking the lorries on that. Myself, I'm a farmer's daughter. I want to bring work into that area, but this is totally unsuitable for where it is at this time. And as I say, the site is absolutely huge, and as I say, they're working 7 days a week. So I would, hasten that this is not passed, because it has blighted the lives of people near it, and which we are now having to relook at those roads to actually put weight restrictions all the way around there, because the roads are just not passable with 2 lorries. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of Councillor Bowkett from the committee? No? Okay, so I'll go back to the planning officer now, and is there any comments you'd like to make before I open to committee? No? Okay, so therefore over to committee. Councillor Carrington, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I've listened carefully to the presentation from our planning officer and from our 2 speakers. And whilst I'm not a farmer's son, I'm certainly not a farmer's daughter. I do take very seriously the point that Mr. Cooper made about farm diversification, which is given significant weight in national planning policy. However, we have to look at that in terms of the overall balance, and I think, to me, there are three issues which have been highlighted on this case. The first one is, do we actually need this facility at all? And if so, do we need it in this rural location? Because we are talking about what are fundamentally industrial processes, and those have impacts. And that relates to my second concern, which again is reflected in the report. As we've seen from the photographs shown on screen, we are looking at narrow rural roads. And whilst it may well be that Mr. Cooper suggests many of the lorries delivering and removing material will be small, we've got no guarantee of that. We don't have the kind of transport plan which would assure us of that. And then the sheer number of them going on those highways, would that be a suitable thing, both in terms of the impact on the roads and above all in terms of the impact on the safety and convenience of other road users in the area. And the final consideration is, if we cite this process, and again I come back to the fact that it is a rural location, here, are we going to have something which fits in with the distinctive character of the locality as an acceptable development in those terms, and what will its impact be on neighbours and other people using the countryside? I'm not convinced on any of those counts, so whilst I do give proper weight in my mind to the issue of farm diversification, overall I find myself in agreement with the officers regarding the planning balance, and I'm afraid I could not support the application. I'd be happy to propose that we accept the officer recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I don't believe there's anything for the officers to come back to there. Councillor Ashton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Carrington has covered pretty much many of the points that were coming to my own mind, but more eloquently than ever I could have done. I share the same broad sympathy with, in terms of farm diversification, and I often think that farmyards in the countryside occasionally can make, particularly if they're redundant, for agricultural purposes, can make ideal locations for doing other stuff. And in previous debates, I am sometimes sceptical that some of that other stuff, the moment that it involves processing that comes under national designations of waste, all of a sudden comes with a load of restrictions that other straightforward industrial practices would not. However, it's not just that one issue that we have to overcome in respect to this application. It's having that assurance that this is small scale, that it's going to remain small scale, and we've got it fairly clear in our papers in this report that we just do not have the controls in place with this application to ensure that that remains the case. There just isn't, as we see there on page 114, the evidence or information presented to demonstrate that it wouldn't have an impact on the environment, on surface water quality, and so there just isn't. I feel that there's so much missing from here, from the application, that whatever my general sort of sympathies of this sort of application might be, there isn't the information that would give me the confidence to support it. And as Councillor Bowkett has outlined, the road network at this location, these aren't sort of rural B roads, these are tiny rural lanes, and again we just haven't got that transport plan, that evidence to demonstrate that this amount of material could be used on, could be accessed to this site on those roads in that way. So, long way of saying I'm very happy to second Councillor Carrington.
Any comments from the officers at all? No, I'm seeing a no. Any comments from anybody else on the committee? Councillor Mrs Overton.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I support the comments that have been made. I appreciate that the speaker spoke very well and made the case very clearly for the applicant. But I think on balance, looking at the fact that this is an industrial activity in an open countryside location that doesn't appear to be suitable or can't be made suitable, it's just not the right application in the right place. Thank you.
Okay, I don't believe the officers need to respond, so I will say that the application for refusal listed on page 114 has been proposed by Councillor Carrington, seconded by Councillor Ashton. All in favour of this, please show now. And that is unanimous. But I will say, anybody against, any abstentions? There are none, so therefore that is refused. So the next application is application 6.3, which is to vary condition 5 at South Witham Quarry. So again, officer introduction, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'll just wait for the slides again. But as you say, this application takes us to South Witham Quarry. The proposal is to vary condition 5 relating to the existing permission covering the site to allow for extended hours, to allow for HGVs parked at the site to leave from 6 AM as opposed to 7 PM, which is currently. First slide, just an overview of the site location. South Witham Quarry is located just to the southwest of South Witham Village, which you can probably just see the main settlement area on the plan there. It is about 16 kilometres to the, Grantham's approximately 16 kilometres to the north and Stamford 16 kilometres to the south. The site's effectively divided into two parts with a whole road running south, connecting to Witham Road, and a further access onto Mill Lane to the north. Next slide, please, Rachel. It might not quite come up on the screen because the lines are quite thin, but this just gives you another view of the site. So as you can see, there's a western extension area, area of working, and an eastern area. The blue line denotes the Hall Road connecting the two and the access onto Witham Road to the south. And again, just to the north, there's an area just, I don't know if you can point it out, Rachel, this is where it says site office. Yeah, that's around there is the access onto Mill Lane. So the application is seeking, as I say, to amend the hours that affect the traffic movements for HGV. Currently, all operations are restricted to a start from 0700 hours, but under this proposal, the applicant is seeking permission to allow preloaded HGVs to leave from 6 AM, with the same restriction being in place for other activities, that be mineral activity, mineral extraction operations, for example, remaining at 7. It's proposed that HGVs will be loaded and sheeted the night before, enabling them to leave in the site early to serve other markets, and that the number of vehicles will be limited to no more than 8 HGVs in that period. Consultation and objections are set out in the report. We've received an objection from South Witham Parish Council, and that's set out in detail in the report. We've also received 12 representations at the time of publication of the report. You'll see in the update that there was a further representation received post-publication, and I can say we've also received an additional representation over the weekend. It's been drawn to my attention this morning. That representation has raised questions and criticisms with regard to interpretations within the officer's report. It's also raised questions with regard to existing controls in relation to dust, noise and traffic, but as well as the impacts of the early start that's been proposed. Having looked at those matters this morning, I don't feel the majority of those issues that have been raised are not pertinent to the consideration of this Section 73 application, which is seeking to amend the hours of operation only. Existing controls would remain in place, as we've discussed earlier with regard to Breeden's operation. And the variation does and therefore it doesn't give rise to anything particularly new that's not already been reported within the report already, and therefore before members today. So in terms of the recommendation, the conclusion of the report, the amended hours, just to make clear, would only relate to the HGVs leaving the site, and as I said, there'd be measures in place to ensure that those would be preloaded, and a limitation proposed that those movements would be restricted to no more than 8 HGVs. HGVs leaving the site would be required to adhere to the existing routing restriction, so as well as having access points north and south, which are located some distance from residential properties, there are existing routing restrictions in place which require vehicles leaving Mill Lane to the north to head west, so therefore away from South Witham Village, and with regard to the entrance or exit on Witham Road to the south, to head east and therefore prevent them running through Thistleton Village. So any early movements would still be required to adhere to those routing restrictions, thereby minimising any impacts on residents in those locations. The revised condition that's been recommended within the report makes that clear. It would make sure there's a distinction and a separation between the HGV movement hours as well as those for the processing and wider operations. So despite the objections and issues that have been raised by the Parish Council and the residents, there's been no objection raised from Environmental Health, South Kesteven District Council or the Highways Officer in respect to the impacts arising from this amendment. So the recommendation is that despite the number of representations received, having considered the issues, there's no objections raised from officers in respect to traffic, noise or impacts on amenity arising from this, and that the additional conditions or the revised conditions that's been proposed will be capable of controlling any impacts, and the existing 106 would remain in place, ensuring that routing would be away from those settlement areas. So the recommendation that the Planning Commission be approved subject to the conditions as set out in the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for the introduction. With this application we have no speakers, so I'm going to open to committee, and my first speaker will be Vice Chairman.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So this application does sit within my division, and thank you for your report as well. This application is one that's seeking to regularise activity that's allegedly been taking place on the site since January, and we're talking about a 6 a.m. start. If approved, I believe it will be only one of 2 quarries in Lincolnshire that are allowed to start their movements at 6 a.m. South Witham is a residential area, and lorries leaving the site already disturb residents with their 7 a.m. start, with staff arriving, quite understandably, before 7 a.m. to ensure they're ready to start work at 7. If this change is allowed, I'm concerned that residents are likely to be disturbed from 5:30, not sort of 6 o'clock, which I think is unacceptable. I'm concerned that if we allow permission for 8 lorries, we're soon going to have an application for all movements to begin at 6 a.m. And I know that we can't consider future applications, but I'm concerned about the creeping potential of development and how enforceable 8 lorries leaving the site is at 6 a.m. I'm also concerned about the precedent that we could be setting for other applications locally, which we've obviously considered this morning as well. So that is a huge concern to me. In the Lincolnshire Minerals and Waste Local Plan, policy DM3 states that planning permission would be granted provided it does not generate unacceptable adverse impacts arising from, amongst others, noise and traffic. And in my opinion, this is likely to cause an adverse impact at earlier than 6 a.m. in the morning. In the Parish Council's comments in the report, you'll also see that they refer to an appeal decision from the Planning Inspectorate for Dunstan Quarry, where the inspector concluded that 7 a.m. was an early enough start. And again, whilst I appreciate that each case needs to be considered on its own individual merits, I feel that decision is relevant to this application. I think it's disappointing that the applicant has not chosen to engage with the Parish Council or local residents before submitting this application. And sort of with that in mind, whilst I'll obviously listen to other members before making a decision, at this point in time, I'm sort of going towards refusal of that permission. Thank you. Thank you.
Any comments from the office at all? No? Okay, so Councillor Ashton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have every sympathy and with the point that Councillor Vernon has just made. When I think of 8 HGVs loaded with aggregate thundering out of a quarry site and down the road at 6 o'clock in the morning, that feels to my mind to be a significant impact on the amenity of people living in South Witham. you know, it one. I don't see how restricting it to only 8 achieves anything. Either we are accepting that that highway network and those roads in that community should be subject to lorries starting off at 8 or not. I don't see what restricting it to 8, what difference that really makes. If we're suggesting that it needs to be restricted to only 8, then it's the same argument for restricting it to none. And on that basis, again, I'll happily listen to the debate as it goes on, but the way I'm heading is I would more than happily support refusing this on the impact to neighbour amenity.
Listening to the debate so far, it's apparent that, you know, looking at the recommendations is for 8 HGVs to leave the site. This implies that people can turn up to work prior to 6 a.m. and this also means that the lorries could be loaded prior to 6 a.m. So it could be that, I don't know whether a lorry shouldn't take too long to load, but by the time you've loaded a lorry, taken it over a weighbridge, etc., I would think that potentially the work might start 5:30 or earlier in the morning for loading purposes to get them away from site. Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I know the point Mark is going to raise, so I'll just clarify the point you've just made. It says in the report that they will be loaded the night before just to assuage that. But I, much like Councillor Vernon and Councillor Ashton, I sat reading that report very uncomfortably because, as Councillor Ashton has said, it will first be 8, then you will get mission creep, then it's can we have 12 please, then it's can we have some more, can we have some more. And I also don't think, unless you're going to have an officer standing there at 5 or 6 in the morning to make sure it's enforceable, I actually don't think it's a particularly enforceable condition, because you're going to have somebody there proving with a video camera or with noise amplifiers to make sure that that's when they're leaving, that's what they're doing, they're not leaving on with their lights on and other matters. I'm also worried, I know applications have to be dealt with in their merits, but we are a quasi-legal committee, so there is quasi-case law, and I think Councillor Vernon cited a very good piece of quasi-case law. And as she's already alluded to, there's only 2 other quarries that are allowed to start earlier. And I also, for the scale of what it's doing, I don't think it's necessary. It's been operating as it has been for as long as it has been, and I think it's just now that the application has been granted, I think it's a case of, we'll just try and move the goalposts a bit and see what we can pinch. But personally, I wouldn't want that in my backyard, so to speak, and I would feel very uncomfortable for those residents if it was granted. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Smith. I was playing devil's advocate in that I don't know what time a planning officer gets up in the morning or a planning enforcement officer gets up in the morning. But in this current society, I don't know if the planning officer might be cycling to the site because we can't use fuel or whatever. You know, I can take it to whatever degree you wish. But, you know, its enforcement becomes an issue. Councillor Carrington.
On that subject, Chairman, can I just assure you that planning officers always get up very early indeed. in one case, I know today at 4:30 in the morning, but we won't go into that. Chairman, I share the concerns expressed, but can I just check a detail with Mr. Willis? In the Parish Council comments, I just want to clarify time working. Parish Council says that in their comments that the quarry itself is working at 6 in the morning, although the transport is limited to 7. Could you just clarify for the committee what the overall working hours, both for the quarry and the existing transport structure, are, please?
Yes, certainly. So the existing hours, I believe, are still as they are on condition 5 within the... sorry, 1 second. No, condition 6, which relates to the normal operations... Oh, sorry, 5 and 6. So it's 7 till 6, Monday to Friday, and 7 till 1. They would remain as is, so that deals with the plant and machinery and normal extraction activities. The proposal is for the HGVs limited for export only or leaving the site 6 till 7. So outside, so the normal activities will remain as is. There's no evidence we've had, as Mr. Councillor Vernon referred to, an investigation open. There's no evidence of any activity of mineral extraction operations taking place earlier than 7 o'clock. That's been investigated. Whilst the case has been open since January, it's been looked and visited several times. There's been no evidence to support that. In terms of the enforceability, just on that point really, the recommendation and the revised conditions are effectively the same as what are currently on, so they are as enforceable as they are currently. So any revision to the amended hours would be no weaker in terms of the existing controls the authority has. I think that answers your question.
Yes, I'm grateful for that clarification, Chairman. Like colleagues, I'm really uneasy about this one. These lorries, when fully loaded, they're very, very heavy, and there's a vibration issue and there is a noise issue, and that just goes with the territory. Nobody for a second is suggesting that we don't need quarries, that we don't need the products of quarries, because we do. But these are very, very large vehicles. When they're full, there's an issue of noise and vibration. I have to say, with a quarry rather smaller in scale than this one in my own division, they're also jolly noisy when they're empty, because they go along the road, they bounce and they clank. So there's a fair amount of noise generated in both ways. There's a balance here, isn't there, between, on the one hand, economic development, which again in national and our local plan policies are given very great weight, and on the other hand, the amenity of the public on the roads, and particularly the amenities of nearby residents. I'm minded to agree with colleagues. The only question in my mind, and here I rely really on Councillor Vernon's local knowledge, is just how far the noise carries, because if we're going to say that we are refusing it on grounds of it being contrary to policy DM3, i.e. that it is likely to cause noise nuisance, or at least that it has not been proved that it wouldn't cause noise nuisance, we need to be fairly confident as a committee that there are noise receptors which will hear these vehicles. And I do share Councillor Ashton's concern. 8 is quite a lot, and I've got this image in my mind of if the reason for doing this is to make sure that they can reach in reasonable working hours perhaps more distant sites, then the chances are that there's going to be a convoy setting off starting at 6 o'clock, which will kind of potentially magnify that impact, because otherwise, you know, if they go at 6:59, fundamentally, they're wasting the opportunity presented by this. So if there are receptors which we are sure will be impacted by this, I would, with some reluctance, take my life in my hand and want to refuse it. But I'd like to hear some local knowledge on that first, please.
So I'm now going to play real devil's advocate, in that we've said that planning officers and planning enforcement officers might not get up at 6 in the morning. And we've said that this is potentially a variation of a condition. I wonder if a planning committee would like to get up early in the morning and go for a site visit and to hear what goes on. And it's not necessary that we get there at 6 a.m, but it might be that we're there a little bit later. And I'm not suggesting lunchtime, but I'm just wondering how dedicated the planning committee are to look at a site visit. Just a little idea. I'll put that one as a little rider for you.
Sorry.
So, Vice Chairman.
Sorry, I was just saying Councillor Pepper would like to speak as well. Just on that note, and I know it is mentioned in the report, and sort of apologies if I'm going over, the nearest residential property is 450 metres from the site, and we are talking a 6 a.m. start. This is the thing, I think, that sort of is absolutely crystal clear, 6 a.m. Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Pepper?
I was going to say, Chairman, I don't like site visits, but...
You mean you like your bed? Let's be precise.
But I don't know the site particularly well, and I think it would certainly help me get my head around this one. And if you're proposing it, I'd be willing to second it.
Okay, well, mine was a proposal, a pseudo proposal. I will take the second. I can see Mr Willis has got his hand in the air. How would you manage to get down to South Witham for an early doors? No, we could do it slightly later, but we could observe vehicles. Obviously, at this time of the year, it would be in darkness, but it could be that we went and looked slightly later in the morning.
I think I just wanted to point out something, if I could, Chairman, with regard to proximity. I think it was raised about proximity to residents. If I could, Rachel, could you bring up the slide again, please? With regard to site visit, obviously, I think we've already got a site visit potentially planned for another site, but that's a completely different location, so we'd have to look at timing for that. But in terms of just, might be helpful before we make a decision with regard to that. Just wanted to bring up this slide and just to reiterate that I hear the concerns with regard to the impacts of traffic, in particular leaving the site early. But to put it in context, the site, as I say, has 2 points of access and entry, Mill Lane and Witham Road. If the vehicles are leaving the site, they are obliged under the 106 routing restriction to head west from Mill Lane. So they automatically are heading away from the village and not into the village. So there'll be, in terms of traffic movements, any early movements would be heading away from the village and not towards the village. And similarly, if they exit the site on Witham Road, a weight restriction actually is already in place preventing traffic through Thistleton Village, but notwithstanding that, there is a routing restriction again that requires them to head east. So east and south, then to the A1. So in terms of impacts of the HGV traffic on residents, in terms of passing of residential properties, be controlled by the 106. In terms of light goods vehicles or staff arriving early, then yes, there is no restriction. But there is no restriction on existing industrial businesses that lie to the north of Mill Lane either, which includes a recycling operation. So there are existing movements along Mill Lane. And just again, in terms of distance, just to put it in some context, roughly speaking, from the entrance of Mill Lane to the edge of settlement of South Witham, about 450 odd metres. So that's from the exit point onto Mill Lane to the settlement boundary. So that gives you an idea of the distance we're talking from the HGVs leaving the site to actually the residential property. And again, going back to the south, you can see while the vehicles are automatically heading east, and it's around 230 metres from the exit point to Thistleton Settlement Village. So quite some distance in terms of entry-exit points from where those vehicles leave. So hopefully that's just helped a little bit in terms of the proximity issue before you make any decision about a visit.
Martha from Legal, please.
Thank you, Chairman. A few comments from me, if I may, just having listened to obviously the members' comments on debate on the application so far. I note that there seems to be a lot of concern about neighbour amenity and receptor points, and equally that a site visit's perhaps been proposed. Just, you know, perhaps want to put forward something else for members to consider in terms of, you obviously, that there is a science, I don't know if I can say that, to obviously noise reception and you know, there are experts. Obviously, the environmental health officer at South Stevens confirmed that they're quite happy with it. However, if members' primary concern is amenity and they intend to, for instance, go on a, I appreciate there is a few other concerns in terms of enforceability, but in terms of the amenity, and members intend to go on a site visit in part to sort of see distances and gauge noise, perhaps members might consider that they may get more benefit from deferring the application for more information to be supplied around noise, if that would give members some more information and, you know, allow them to determine the application as opposed to relying on a site visit in that regard. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for your comments. Now, I've got 2 or 3 additional speakers, so we're starting to run a little bit of a line here. The next one is Councillor Skinner.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's about amenity, it's about mission creep, 6 o'clock in the morning for heavy HGVs, and I will take up with Councillor Carrington. Actually, it's the empty ones that cause the most damage to the roads. That's well documented in inner cities. I'm concerned about this attacking people's amenity. And I'm also concerned that it's can we keep HGVs on a site I thought was a quarry. This actually looks to me like it might be another application for an HGV yard, but taking it as it's listed, I couldn't support it from the point of view of lack of amenity. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Overton next, please.
Happy with the deferral, and a camera can be put up to record what time vehicles come and go. So I don't think enforcement will be an issue. It's more about the amenity impact on neighbouring users. And I did take the point about the Dunstan Quarry where they thought 7 o'clock was early enough. I think that's quite a strong point. Thank you.
Councillor Ashton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It does make a difference to some of my thinking on this with the clarification on the routing. That this is turning left out onto Mill Lane and going right the way around by, I think, Thistleton, the village to the south. But at the same time, I do come to the view that there will be merit in us going and having a look. If we are deferring for more information, at the same, we might as well go and just get a feel for this area, a feel for how it's going to work, and a feel for whether how this, the impact that this will have on that, on the amenity of people living nearby. I don't know quite where we are on moving and seconding. I'm more than happy to move deferral for a site visit and more information.
May I second that deferral for exactly the same reasons then, please? Thank you, Councillor Ashton.
Right.
I was going to second it, but it's already been seconded. But could I just, for the sake of clarity, ask that I thought Martha made an extremely helpful suggestion. There are plenty of ways in which noise impacts can be scientifically modelled. What I feel that we don't quite have here, and even won't be answered by a site visit necessarily, is a proper statistical evaluation of the noise impacts. It could well be that when the District Council made its comments, they had done some modelling, I don't know, but if we can get something which would be hard evidence, I'm sure that would be very helpful to members.
Vice Chairman again, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just conscious that sort of if we're deferring for particular reasons, we need to include all of the reasons or we can't consider them again in the future. I'd just like to clarify that sort of from my point of view, I'm seconding deferral for further information, particularly on the impact of the 6 a.m. start. Just to be sort of clear, not just traffic and highways, but sort of, yeah, for further information on the whole lot. Thank you.
Mr Willis, are you happy that this is where we could go? There's a little, I don't know what time of day you're intending the site visit might take place, but...
I mean, I think the first thing is we obviously need to gather the information. Yeah. That will require a survey, so there'll be a time for that. With that in mind and mindful, we've already got potentially a site visit before next committee at a different location. I suspect we're looking at a date sometime beyond next committee. So I think the first thing is we perhaps need to look at agreeing a date at a later time. But in terms of the request, we can certainly, if committee decide that, we can go and get that further information. So it will take some time to gather that anyway.
Yeah, certainly it's not going to come back straight away. And the other site visit is in the opposite direction with relation to the county. So we can't put the two together. Okay, so what I have tabled now is I have a deferment together with a site visit proposed by Councillor Ashton, seconded by Councillor Vernon, that we look at going to do a site visit, not at 6 a.m. I did try and get you there early, but not at 6 a.m. With a view to going and looking at the site, the amenity and the noise issues and anything else associated with it, but with it tied down, as you said, Councillor Vernon, with regard to this change in condition 5 for 6 a.m. Legal happy, officers happy, committee happy. That's the proposal. It has been seconded. All in favour, please show. Wow, we've got there in the end. Everybody agrees. Anybody against? Any abstentions? Okay, so that's where we'll be going in a couple of weeks' time or so. So that's where we stand with that one. Now, moving on to the separate batch of papers or the separate email, we have the West Burton Solar Project, item 7.1. Make it 5 minutes. We'll have a deferment for 5 minutes. Make it 5 minutes because I don't know how long we're going to be with this next item, but I do want to deal with it this side of lunchtime. Okay.
The final report today is for a development consent order, an application by West Burton Solar Project for a development consent order to install solar PV panels to generate up to 480 megawatts of power and an on-site battery storage with capacity for 20 megawatts per hour and associated infrastructure, access and underground 400 kV electronic connection cable to the National Grid substation at West Burton Power Station. So this report is a little bit different to some of the other development consent order reports that have been brought to the committee over the last few months. What you're being asked today is to just look at the local impact report, which as part of the development consent order process needs to be submitted to the examining authority. There will be an opportunity at the next committee in December to see a further report which will address the council's formal response to this application, but due to the timetable set by the examining authority, the deadline for submission of a local impact report is the 24th of November, and therefore clearly that's in advance of the next committee in December, and the deadline for the council's formal comments is the 6th of December, which enables that report to be brought to the committee in December. So I just wanted to give you a bit of background as to why it's slightly different to how we've brought other papers in relation to development consent orders in recent times. And the other thing I just want to draw attention to before I go into the presentation is to request that the recommendation is amended so that it gives delegation to the head of planning to make amendments to the local impact report that has to be submitted on the 24th of November. At this stage, we still haven't received the comments from the agricultural land classification specialist who we've instructed to prepare a report. I'm assured that that will be available before the 24th of November to be incorporated into the local impact report that has to be submitted to the examining authority. But just to draw your attention that it will be necessary to make further changes to the local impact report that you see today, to that will be submitted to the examining authority. So with that in mind, quickly just go through some slides. So the first slide, you've seen this before. It discusses applications in the East Midlands region for solar projects, to give you an idea of the number that are currently in the pipeline, as it were, for a development consent order. Next slide, please. And this slide focuses in a little bit more detail to the West Lindsey area. And again, we've already seen reports in relation to Cottam and Gate Burton solar projects, which are both at the examination stage. West Burton is the one in blue at the bottom of your of that slide, which is due for the examination to commence this week. So you can see there its proximity to the other projects and the proposed cable route to the West Burton substation. Next slide, please. And again, coming into sort of micro detail for this application, shows the red line boundaries for the 3 areas where it's proposed to install the solar panels, and also the cable route to the West Burton Power Station. Next slide, please. And the final 3 slides are just going right to the sort of micro level and looking at the 3 locations which are referred to in the report for each of the areas where solar panels are proposed to be installed. So This is West Burton 1. Move the next one, please. West Burton 2. And finally, West Burton 3. So hopefully that just gives you a geographical context to where this particular proposal sits in relation to the other ones in the locality. So, as I say, the report before you just sets out in some detail around about what the proposal's for, also the purpose of a local impact report and how that is an important part of the development consent order process. There's a requirement that the Secretary of State does take consideration of that report when she makes her decision on the application sometime next year. And then the report then goes on to identify the 3 different areas where the solar panels are proposed to be installed: West Burton 1, 2 and 3, with a bit of background information to each of those sites. Some information about the cable route corridor, and also finally the decommissioning aspect of the proposal as well. So, as I say, the sort of detailed appendix to this report sets out the Council's local impact report, which obviously goes into quite a lot of detail. The areas of concern that are highlighted in that report relate to a potential conflict in terms of landscape amenity in the area, both in resulting from this proposal on its own, together with cumulatively with the other projects in this geographical area. Out of trial trenching that has been undertaken at the pre-application stage, and your officer's view that that is insufficient to enable a full assessment of the potential existence of archaeological assets in the area. Without that additional information being available, it's not informative. Well, we're not able to say with any certainty that assets of historical importance won't be potentially affected by this proposal. So we're requesting that additional trial trenching is undertaken prior to the Secretary of State making her decision on the application. The other area of concern is in relation to potential highway conflicts, particularly in relation to West Burton 1 and the proposed construction route for vehicles, and that at this stage the Highway Authority is concerned that the highway access that would be necessary to use that to access that construction point is insufficient for the size of vehicles which would be needed to access that road. So there's a potential negative impact on the local highway local highway network. And finally, whilst it's also identified in the local impact report about a conflict with the agricultural land classification, that's on the basis of the further information that we're still awaiting from the agricultural land specialist, and that section will probably need to be amended once that final report is received. So on that basis, delegation to the head of planning to make changes to the local impact report following receipt of the outstanding soil and agricultural land classification report, so that can be updated in time for the report to be submitted to the examining authority on the 24th of November.
Thank you for that concise introduction, and also the fact that identifying the fact that the report will be delegated to the head of planning, so that any amendments could be made to fit in with those timescales. From the committee, is there anybody on the committee that would like to comment with regard to this report? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of points. I would argue the impacts with respect to landscape character would be significant with respect to the cumulative impact these sites will have. It essentially turns what is at present a picturesque and typical Lincolnshire views of agricultural field into, let's be frank, what is basically an industrial eyesore which spans swathes and swathes across West Lindsey district. For the avoidance of doubt, Chairman, I should also declare that I am a West Lindsey district councillor as well, but I've not had this discussion with any colleagues at West Lindsey other than bringing this up now. It will also have a negative impact on the economy, as Lincolnshire is heavily reliant on tourism, but especially West Lindsey, and is also its probably secondary industry, and its primary industry obviously is agriculture across the district. With regards to 8.11, could officers advise how the impact with this regard is not deemed significantly negative? So it's only a negative impact rather than significantly so. Thirdly, Chairman, it's clear from point 12.22 that there has been a total unwillingness, to comply with planning regulations with respect to heritage on the part of the applicant, which, if we were the decision maker, Chairman, would likely equate to a substantial and significant harm as per our duties under the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 as amended. This begs the question, what other harms are currently unknown? Could officers advise what other harms they feel they have insufficient information on, and that for those areas we express in the strongest possible terms the harms they will have if these issues are not rectified, if the Secretary of State or other decision maker, who is the examining authority, is determined to grant planning permission. Personally, Chairman, I think this just highlights the wider issues of how this specific application has been conducted, and also certainly my frustration with the wider process of how the NSIP process works. Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. McBride?
I mean, in terms of the wording, the advice that is given in terms of how you identify impacts in the local impact report is either it's positive, negative or neutral. It doesn't suggest that we could use different terms. I think those sort of terms would be more appropriate to be used in the council's written comments on this application, which, as I say, there'll be a further report brought to the committee in December, and at that time, if there's a consideration that the wording that's identified in the report isn't strong enough, then obviously the committee can ask for it to be, I suppose, sort of, I'll say reinforced, but basically a stronger point put if the committee don't feel that's strong enough. So I think that's probably the time when that sort of wording would be appropriate. Other than the outstanding report in relation to soils and agricultural land classification, there's nothing else that we've identified as officers that's deficient in terms of the application and the information that's been put forward at this stage, other than obviously the archaeology and the highway concerns that are identified in the local impact report. But everything else we're consent as officers has been dealt with appropriately.
I'm sure that you've picked up on the comments of Councillor Smith, and you have the delegation to move forward with it. So if there's something you'd like to impact on at a future point, well, there is an opportunity there to do it. Okay, Councillor Mrs Overton.
Thank you, Chairman. I support the comments just made, and thank you for doing a really thorough document. There's certainly a lot in here, and it's always a lot of work. Much appreciated. Just picking up a couple of things, if I might, and my normal thing to go for is the land, the use of the land. And are we allowed to take into account loss of agricultural value? I don't know if we've... I think probably you're going to strengthen that when you've got this other report, because I'm really, looking for that. One of the points that is made, rightly so, is that there is this is renewable energy, but what is not always made so clear is what is lost at the same time. And that, I think, is important. What food are we not producing? and what are we not doing if this is happening? And I still think that's important to make clear. On the points about the batteries that you got on page 42, you do put that the risk of fire is low, but what we normally do with risk is multiply the likelihood of it happening with the adversity of its impact. So if it's a very bad thing that happens very seldom, it will still get a high score for risk. So I think, yes, it may not be likely to happen, but if it does happen, it would have a very severe adverse impact. And that's why the risk, that has to be taken into account with the risk. So I would have probably beefed that up a little bit if there's any way that that can be done within your rules and regulations, which I appreciate we are all tied by. But overall, and then again, I think, as you say, I would have probably strengthened some things, but I do take your point that this probably isn't the place to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It goes without saying, Councillor Smith's mentioned the fact that he's a West Lindsey councillor. I should also mention that I'm also a West Lindsey councillor too. It doesn't preclude me from dealing with anything with regard to this, and it doesn't affect anything with regard to how we're going. Martha.
Just for clarity, Chairman, and to put on the record that neither Lincolnshire County Council or West Lindsey District Council are the determining authorities in this matter. Thank you.
But for the sake of clarity, I will just make that simple declaration. Okay, anybody else wish to comment? Okay, well, are you happy that there is a recommendation in, there is a resolution, so it does need proposing? I'm going to propose it. And there's lots of hands in there. Councillor Smith's seconded it.
If you could just confirm, Chairman, that's with the delegation.
With the delegation, and it's all been thoroughly identified. So I will put it to a vote. All in favour of that delegation. Thank you. And I think that is unanimous. Anybody against? No, there isn't. Sorry, there's one against. Any against? One against. Any abstentions? So one against. So it isn't unanimous, but it is very clearly carried. Okay, so that deals with item 7.1, and thank you very much. Now, before you all retire, it's been sort of murmured through the meeting that there might be a site visit or two. I believe that there is, before the next meeting, an opportunity for you all to have a little bus trip somewhere, and it's to potentially the Manby area, I think. Is that correct? Mr McBride? Or no, Mr Willis?
Yes, thanks, Chairman. Yeah, we've got an application for a proposed anaerobic digestion facility up at near Manby. So it's been quite worthwhile members having a visit to that site. With that in mind, we'd be looking at obviously carrying out a visit before the committee and after the report's been published, so members have got an opportunity to review that. I think we're looking there for the week commencing the 27th of November. Well, yeah, I mean,
So
yeah,
on the,
we need to put a date in the
okay,
diary.
so on the Tuesday there's the Environment Committee at County Council. Wednesday I could do. Wednesday. Sorry? 6 a.m. No.
I've got a 2 o'clock as well.
Morning would be, could we do morning?
Morning be fine.
Morning?
7 a.m.
Okay, so it will be Wednesday morning on the 29th.
Chairman,
And
can I just say that is the public protection, clashes with public protection meeting.
do we?
I
Okay.
know some of the members here are on that committee.
Right, so how about Thursday? Thursday the 30th?
Yeah, Thursday morning, afternoon time.
Okay, Friday the 1st?
I can't do Friday.
So it's full council, so it's either Monday or Thursday. Monday or Thursday, which would you like? Hands in the air for Monday. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those for Thursday. 2, 3. Monday it will be. How about that? Thank you very much. So that deals with that one. So, safe journey home to where have we?
Oh, gosh.
Well, we keep having these committees, don't we? It will have to be Thursday the 30th then. So there you go. Well, fine. So, that, God, what a rabble, eh? So it'll be Thursday the 30th.